Hi folks, welcome to this week's episode of Inspirational Women from History. Today we're going back to the golden age of Hollywood and looking at a bombshell who really deserves to be known for more than just her pretty face. Hedy Lamarr was born as Hedwig Keisler in Vienna 1914. She was introduced to science by her father, who would take her on long walks and explain different technological inventions to her, and to the arts by her mother, who enrolled her in piano classes and dance classes from an early age. Growing up, her looks took centre stage. She won a beauty contest at age 12 and began acting at age 16. One of her first films was a film named Ecstasy. This was actually quite controversial at the time, as not only did it have nude scenes, it also had a scene depicting a female orgasm. That was a shot of her face while she was orgasming. At the time, this was considered scandalous, although apparently they got the expressions they wanted from her face by stabbing her feet with pins. Her husband was extremely wealthy and owned a munitions factory. He had ties with both Nazi Germany and of course Austria itself was under Nazi rule at the time, and as well as Mussolini's regime in Italy, despite the fact that he was of Jewish descent. Now, her husband was also controlling. He controlled everything about her life. She's quoted as having said that basically all he wanted was a doll. He wanted someone to look pretty and host his parties. And Hedy wasn't about to let that happen. She was also Jewish herself, so was also at risk under the government at the time, and as well as people that he was selling ammunition to. So in 1937, she fled first to Paris and then to London. Now, she apparently did this by disguising herself as a maid and cycling to freedom. Some accounts also say that she persuaded her husband to let her wear all her jewellery to a dinner party that night. And then once the dinner party was over, she disappeared with all her jewels. In London, she met the head of MGM, which was one of the major motion picture companies in Hollywood at the time. He offered her a contract almost straight away. She refused, even though it would have paid her $125 a week. Now, converting that to current terms, that's the equivalent of £2,278 a week. That was dollars. $125 a week, and it converts to $2,278 today. So that's what buying power that would have had. She refuses that. Turns out they're both on the same steamer to go to New York. They get talking, get to know each other, and he offers another contract. This time for $500 a week. So that's $9,112 a week. She accepted that one. She also changed her name when she started working in America, from Hedwig to Hedy. And the suggestion for changing her name came so that she could distance herself from ecstasy, because that was actually banned in America. And she chose the surname Lamarr as an homage to silent movie star Barbara Lamarr, who was one of the great beauties of her time. Despite her beauty, or perhaps actually more because of it, Lamarr was typecast. In pretty much all her films, she tended to play the exotic seductress. In those days, when it came to movies, women fell into two categories: Madonna or whore. Unfortunately for Hedy, her foreign accent, her dark looks made her fall into the latter. As a result, her characters very often had few lines, leaving her bored, basically. To combat the boredom, she began inventing in her trailer between scenes and takes. Yep, inventing. A friend of hers, Howard Hughes, who built aeroplanes, gave her some equipment so she could have a small lab in her trailer, just to help her out. He encouraged her to follow these interests. He even talked to her about his own problems and his own projects with his planes. For instance, he spoke to her about wanting to improve the speed of one of his aeroplanes. Hedy went out, bought a book on fish and a book on birds, compared the fastest of both creatures, and then drew an idea for a new wing shape based on the fins of fish and wings of birds. And when she showed it to Hughes, his response was, "You're a genius," and he used it. When America was starting to become involved in World War II, she wanted to help with the war effort. She did try to join the National Inventors Committee, believing because she knew about ammunitions and weaponry because of her former husband and his work, she thought she could be of use, helpful information, even some of her own inventions. However, they told her that the best thing she could do for the war effort was help sell war bonds. Because, you know, she's just an actress. Anyway, but she did. But she couldn't stop thinking about how much more helpful she could have been if she'd been taken seriously, if she was inventing. She heard about how the signals of remote-controlled torpedoes were being jammed, and therefore the torpedoes were then going off course. And she started thinking of how this could be prevented. Her idea was to prevent the signals from jamming, to have a frequency hopping signal. So previously you have your frequency and the signal goes from here to here. If you put something in between, that connection's lost and your torpedo goes off course. Now, say you've got multiple lines, multiple frequencies. Now, you've got your target and your torpedo. And in order to prevent jamming, they constantly change frequency onto whichever one happens to be the strongest. They'll jump from signal to signal depending on which one has the stronger connection, meaning that they can't be jammed, because as soon as one frequency becomes jammed, they move on to another. Obviously this is genius. It's perfect. With the help of a friend, George Anthiel, who is a pianist and a composer, they developed this idea. They came up with a device. They also drew up plans for the system and they patented it. They took it to the Navy and they claimed, they were like, "Oh, it's not going to work, too bulky, do this, it's fine." However, they went on to show it to, the Navy went on to show it to contractors that they'd hired. So we've got this, make it work. It already worked, but they said, right, this is the building blocks, build from that. And this happened several times over the years. Neither Hedy or George received any money from this, even though it was patented, even though they should have been receiving the money for it. They never did, right up until the contract expired in the 50s. Now, this technology, now known as spread spectrum techniques, was the basis of a lot of modern day technologies, such as Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So if you're watching this video on your phone, you can thank Hedy Lamarr. So, hope you enjoyed that, guys. As always, my sources are down below. And I'll see you next week for more music and history. Mwah!